The Horizon Quest was a well-known fishing trawler, famous for its deep-sea catches. But the crew had heard rumors, whispers of an abandoned ship that appeared out of nowhere, luring fishermen to their doom. After a long day at sea, Captain Dave decided to investigate. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" his first mate, Tom, asked, eyeing the ominous storm clouds gathering in the distance. "Just a little detour, Tom. We'll be back before the storm hits." "I promise," Dave replied with a grin, masking his own unease. As they approached the coordinates, the fog thickened, and suddenly, there it was, a ghostly outline of a ship, its sails tattered and its hull covered in rust. "Look at that," shouted Sarah, the deckhand. "It's just drifting. Let's check it out," Dave said, excitement in his voice. The crew anchored beside the eerie vessel, cautiously boarding the marina mist. The air was stale, filled with the scent of mildew and decay. The ship felt abandoned, yet an unsettling tension hung in the air. "Guys, this place gives me the creeps," Tom said, glancing around. "We should leave." "Relax, it's just an old ship. Let's see if there's anything valuable," Dave urged, leading the way into the dark interior. As they explored, they found remnants of the crew's belongings, plates stacked neatly, clothes hanging in the cabin, and a journal lying open on a table. Sarah picked it up and began to read aloud. The captain wrote about a storm that came out of nowhere, how they lost control and the ship became cursed. "Cursed?" Tom scoffed. "That's ridiculous." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the deck, and the ship shuddered violently. "What was that?" Sarah cried out, dropping the journal. "Stay here. I'll check it out," Dave commanded, but Tom grabbed his arm. "Wait. We shouldn't split up." Ignoring Tom, Dave rushed outside. The fog swirled, and he could barely see. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" he shouted. No response. Just silence, punctuated by the creaking of the ship. Moments later, a chilling laugh erupted from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here." "Who's there?" Dave demanded, heart racing. As the figure stepped into view, Dave's blood ran cold. It was a man, gaunt and pale, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. "You're trapped now, like the rest of us," the specter said, pointing to the horizon. "The sea demands its due. Get away from me," Dave shouted, stumbling backward. "Captain!" Tom yelled, rushing to his side. "What's happening?" "Run! We need to get back to the boat," Dave cried, panic overtaking him. But as they turned, the ghostly crew materialized around them, their faces twisted in agony. "You'll never escape," the ghost captain howled, and the ship began to shake violently. The crew sprinted back to the Horizon Quest, but the mist thickened, enveloping them. As they climbed aboard, Tom looked back. "What about Sarah? We can't help her now," Dave shouted, starting the engine. But the moment they turned away, they heard Sarah's scream echoing from the marina mist. "No! Sarah!" Tom cried, but it was too late. The ship began to fade into the fog, leaving only a chilling silence behind. As the storm approached, they realized they had escaped one nightmare only to face another. After a long week of sailing, the crew of the Sea Breeze found themselves lost in the vastness of the ocean. The sky had darkened, and the horizon was devoid of land, but just as hopelessness began to set in, they spotted a small island in the distance. "Look! Land!" exclaimed Lucy, the navigator. "Let's head for it." As they approached, the island appeared lush and inviting, but an uneasy feeling lingered in the air. "Something about this place feels off," Jack, the deckhand, muttered. "Don't be ridiculous." "We need to rest," Lucy replied, anchoring the boat. They disembarked, and the thick foliage surrounded them. "I'll scout ahead," Jack said, venturing into the trees. The others followed, eager to explore. "Jack, wait up!" Lucy called, but he had already disappeared into the undergrowth. The remaining crew exchanged worried glances. "Let's stick together, Mark," the captain suggested. "Jack will be fine." Minutes passed, and Jack didn't return. "I'll go find him," Lucy said, determination in her voice. "Be careful." Mark cautioned, but she slipped away into the shadows. As Lucy ventured deeper into the island, she heard strange rustling sounds and felt eyes watching her. "Jack. Is that you?" she called, but only silence answered. Suddenly, she stumbled upon a clearing filled with strange, twisted trees. At the center stood a stone altar, adorned with bones and mysterious carvings. "What is this place?" she whispered, stepping closer. "Lucy." Jack's voice echoed from the darkness. "Help. Jack." She turned, but the shadows seemed to shift, coalescing into dark figures that circled her. "What's happening?" "Join us," a voice hissed from the shadows, and the figures lunged at her. Lucy sprinted back toward the beach, heart pounding. "Mark. We need to leave," she shouted, but when she reached the shore, the boat was gone. "Where's the boat?" she cried, panic setting in. "They took it." Mark shouted, backing away from the encroaching darkness. "Something's wrong with this island." The shadows advanced, and Lucy grabbed Mark's hand, but their escape was cut off. "You cannot leave," the figures chanted, their voices a haunting melody. "Run!" Mark yelled, pulling Lucy into the trees. They dashed through the underbrush, but the darkness closed in, branches clawing at their skin. They could feel the entity behind them, its breath hot against their necks. Just as they thought they would be caught, they burst back into the clearing where the altar stood. "What is this place?" Mark gasped, looking around frantically. "It's a trap," Lucy said, her eyes wide. "We have to destroy the altar." They grabbed rocks and began to smash the stones, shouting in defiance. With each blow, the shadows screamed, retreating into the darkness. Finally, with one last strike, the altar shattered. The ground trembled, and the island began to shake. "Run!" Mark shouted, grabbing Lucy's hand as they sprinted toward the beach. As they reached the shore, the island crumbled, swallowed by the sea. They turned to see the shadows dissipating, their cries fading into the ocean. "We made it!" Lucy gasped, collapsing onto the sand. But as they caught their breath, the horizon darkened again. "What now?" Mark asked, dread creeping back in. "Look!" Lucy pointed as a massive wave began to rise on the horizon. "We're not safe yet." The Ocean Explorer, a deep-sea research vessel, was on a mission to map the ocean floor. Dr. Helen Brooks and her team were excited to uncover new discoveries, but during their descent into the depths, a sudden mechanical failure struck, leaving them stranded miles beneath the surface. "Great, just great. We're stuck," shouted Mike, the engineer. "The thrusters are down." "Calm down, Mike. We can fix this," Helen replied, trying to maintain her composure. "What's the status on the backup systems?" "They're offline too." "We're dead in the water," he exclaimed, his voice rising in panic. "Let's not panic yet," said Tom, the biologist. "We still have power for our lights. We can." Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. "What the hell?" Mike shouted, fumbling for the emergency switch. "We need to use the emergency lights," Helen instructed, her heart racing. "Tom, can you check the systems?" "On it," Tom replied, his voice tense as he worked. As he fiddled with the controls, they heard a low rumbling sound reverberate through the submersible. "What is that?" Helen asked, unease creeping into her voice. "I don't know. It's coming from outside." Mike shouted, his eyes wide with fear. Then, the sub rocked violently, slamming them against the walls. "Brace yourselves!" Helen yelled, gripping the console. "What is happening?" Tom exclaimed as the rumbling grew louder. "It feels like something's out there." As the noise reached a deafening roar, a massive shadow passed by the window, its silhouette barely visible in the darkness. "What was that?" Helen gasped, her breath catching in her throat. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," Mike shouted. "It's not safe." Just then, the lights flickered back on, revealing a monstrous creature, its scales glistening in the dim light. The team stared in horror as it turned its enormous eye toward them, filled with ancient malice. "Run! Get away from the windows!" Helen yelled. The creature slammed into the submersible, sending the 3 team members sprawling across the control room. "Hold on!" Helen shouted, trying to regain her footing as alarms blared around them, filling the space with chaos. "It's going to breach!" Mike screamed, scrambling to the emergency controls. "We need to seal the hatches." Tom struggled to his feet, his eyes wide with terror. "What if it comes in? We can't let it get to us." "Just do it!" Helen yelled, rushing to help Mike as he fought with the controls. "We need to stop the water from getting in." The submersible shook violently again, and Helen glanced out the window. The creature's massive tentacles writhed, smacking against the hull, leaving deep impressions in the metal. "We have to get out of here," she urged, fear coursing through her veins. "Almost got it." Mike grunted, flipping switches in a frantic effort. "If we don't seal this soon, we'll be underwater for good." With a final click, the emergency hatches sealed shut, and the alarms quieted momentarily. "We're safe for now," Tom said, his voice shaky. "But it knows we're here." Helen leaned against the console, trying to catch her breath. "We need to figure out how to get to the surface. If we can't move, we're as good as dead." "Let's check the backup systems again," Mike suggested, pulling up the diagnostics. "Maybe we can get the thrusters online and make a run for it." As they worked, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the confined space. Suddenly, the creature slammed into the submersible again, and the lights went out once more, plunging them into darkness. "Why does it keep hitting us?" Tom asked, panic rising in his voice. "Maybe it's trying to break in," Mike replied, his hands trembling as he fumbled with the controls. "Or it's just toying with us." Then, through the darkness, they heard a low, guttural growl that sent chills down their spines. "What do we do?" Helen whispered, her voice barely audible. "We need to stay calm," Mike said, trying to keep his composure. "We can't let it know we're scared." "I'm not scared," Tom insisted, his voice shaking. "But we need to get out of here." Just then, the lights flickered back on, and to their horror, the creature was right outside their window, its massive eye staring directly at them. "It's watching us," Helen breathed, her heart racing. "Quick! Get the thrusters working!" Mike yelled, his voice filled with urgency. "If we can create enough thrust, we might be able to escape." "I'm trying," Tom said, his fingers flying over the controls. Come on, come on." As the creature pressed against the hull, the submersible creaked and groaned under the pressure. "We don't have much time," Helen urged, her voice rising in panic. Then, with a deafening roar, the creature smacked its tentacle against the window, cracking the glass. "It's going to break in," Mike shouted, his eyes wide with fear. "Now! Hit the thrusters!" Helen commanded. Tom slammed his finger down on the button, and the submersible lurched forward as the engines roared to life. "We're moving," he yelled, relief flooding his voice as they began to ascend. But the creature was relentless. It thrashed around the submersible, trying to knock them back down into the depths. "Hold on!" Mike shouted, gripping the console as they jolted violently. "Faster! We need to get to the surface!" Helen cried, her heart pounding as the pressure built around them. They felt the submersible gaining speed, but the creature followed, its massive form looming behind them. "It's going to catch us!" Tom shouted, his voice filled with dread. Just as they thought they were safe, the creature lunged, smashing into the submersible one last time. The hull buckled, and they felt a rush of water flooding in. "No! Seal the breach!" Helen screamed, scrambling to the emergency controls. "I can't. It's too late." Mike shouted, his voice filled with panic. A group of friends set sail on a weekend trip aboard the Adventurer, eager for a break from their everyday lives. The sun shone brightly as they left the dock, laughter and excitement filling the air. But as they ventured further into the ocean, dark clouds began to gather ominously on the horizon. "Looks like a storm is brewing," Sarah, the captain, said, glancing at the sky. "Don't worry. It's probably just a passing shower," Jake replied, dismissing her concern. "We'll be fine." But as the clouds thickened, the wind picked up, and soon they found themselves caught in a violent storm. Waves crashed against the boat, tossing it around like a toy. They struggled to maintain control, fear creeping into their hearts. "Hold on. We need to steer into the waves," Sarah shouted, gripping the wheel tightly. "I can't. The waves are too strong." Jake yelled back, panic in his voice. "We're going to capsize." Just then, a massive wave crashed over the boat, sending them tumbling into the icy water. Sarah gasped as she fought to stay afloat, her heart racing. "Where is everyone?" she shouted, scanning the chaos around her. "Over here," Jake called, struggling to reach her. They swam toward each other, but the storm raged on, separating them once again. "Guys! Where are you?" Sarah screamed, her voice hoarse from the salt water. Just as she began to lose hope, she spotted a piece of debris floating nearby. She swam to it, clinging desperately as the storm continued to batter the ocean. Hours passed, and as the storm finally subsided, Sarah found herself alone in the vastness of the ocean. "Jake! Emily! Can anyone hear me?" she called, her voice breaking. Suddenly, she saw a flicker of light in the distance. Maybe it's a boat, she thought, her heart racing with hope. She began to swim toward it, but as she got closer, the light dimmed and revealed an old, weathered ship, its sails tattered and its hull covered in barnacles. "Hello?" Sarah called, her voice echoing in the stillness. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered her. Swallowing her fear, she climbed aboard the ghostly vessel. The air was thick with an unsettling presence. "Hello? Is anyone here?" she tried again, but only the creaking of the ship responded. As she ventured deeper into the ship, she found remnants of a crew, old photographs, clothes left behind, and a diary lying open on a table. She picked it up and began to read, her stomach sinking with dread. The storm came without warning. "We were cursed to sail these waters for eternity, seeking the souls of those lost at sea." Just then, a loud crash echoed from above. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, her heart pounding. She raced back to the deck, but as she stepped outside, she found herself surrounded by shadowy figures, ghostly sailors with hollow eyes and mournful expressions. "You shouldn't have come here," one of them warned, his voice raspy and filled with sorrow. "Now you're part of our crew." "No. I'm not like you," Sarah screamed, trying to back away. "I just wanted to survive." But the crew advanced, their hands reaching for her. "You cannot escape the curse," another ghost said, their voices a haunting chorus. In a desperate bid for freedom, Sarah sprinted back toward the edge of the ship. The ghostly crew followed closely, their wails echoing in her ears. "I won't join you," she shouted, grabbing a loose rope and swinging herself overboard. She plunged into the water, the coldness shocking her system. The ghostly crew loomed above, their faces twisted in rage. "You cannot escape us," they cried, their voices mingling with the howling wind. As she swam away, Sarah felt the weight of despair pressing down on her. The ocean was vast, but she had to fight for her life. Just when she thought hope was lost, she spotted a flicker of light in the distance, this time, a real boat. With renewed determination, she swam toward it, her strength waning as she called out for help. "Help! Please," she screamed, her voice hoarse. The boat drew closer, and she could make out figures on board. "There's someone in the water," a voice shouted. "Throw a line," another replied. As they reached for her, Sarah felt a surge of relief. But just as she was about to be pulled aboard, she looked back at the ghostly crew, now standing on the deck of the old ship, their faces twisted in anguish. "You can never truly escape," they cried. The Endeavour was in the midst of an oceanic research mission when disaster struck. A massive storm hit, tearing through the vessel and sending the crew scrambling. "We need to secure the equipment," shouted Lucas, the lead scientist. "Forget the equipment. We need to save ourselves." Sarah, the biologist, yelled back, struggling to keep her footing as the boat rocked violently. Suddenly, a wave crashed over the deck, sweeping several crew members into the churning sea. "No!" Lucas screamed, reaching for them, but it was too late. The storm raged on, tearing the ship apart. As the vessel began to sink, Lucas and Sarah managed to cling to a piece of debris that had broken free from the ship's wreckage. The storm howled around them, waves crashing violently as they struggled to stay afloat. "Do you see anyone?" Lucas shouted over the roar of the wind, scanning the turbulent waters for any sign of their crewmates. "No. Everyone's gone." Sarah cried, her voice filled with desperation. "We need to get to safety. Hold on tight. We'll make it," Lucas said, trying to reassure her as they drifted further from the sinking ship. The chaos of the storm raged, waves crashing around them, threatening to pull them under. As the storm slowly began to subside, an eerie calm settled over the ocean. The once violent waves turned into a glassy surface, reflecting the dark clouds overhead. Lucas looked around, his heart pounding. "We need to find land," he urged, but the vastness of the open ocean surrounded them, making it difficult to determine direction. Hours passed, and the sun began to set, casting an orange glow across the horizon. The debris they clung to was beginning to feel less stable. "I can't hold on much longer," Sarah panted, her strength waning. "What if we're never found?" Lucas gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay focused. "We will be found. We just have to hang on a little longer." Just then, they spotted something in the distance, an island silhouetted against the evening sky. "Look! Land!" Lucas shouted, his excitement bubbling over. "We need to paddle toward it." With renewed energy, they kicked their legs, using their arms to steer the debris as best they could. As they drew closer, the island appeared lush and inviting, but something about it felt off. A dense fog clung to the shore, obscuring their view. "Do you think anyone lives there?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "I don't know, but we can't just stay here," Lucas replied, glancing back at the vast, empty ocean behind them. "Let's find out." They finally reached the sandy beach, exhausted but relieved. As they pulled themselves onto the shore, they took a moment to catch their breath, the sound of the waves crashing gently behind them. "Let's explore," Lucas said, glancing at the dense foliage that surrounded the island. "Maybe we can find food or a way to signal for help." "Okay, but let's not wander too far," Sarah cautioned, her eyes darting nervously toward the trees. "This place feels strange." As they ventured deeper into the island, they found remnants of an old campsite, rusty cans, tattered tents, and strange markings on the trees. "What happened here?" Sarah whispered, a chill running down her spine. "I don't know, but we should keep moving," Lucas replied, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that hung in the air. Maybe there are still survivors. But as they walked, they began to hear soft sounds, muffled voices that seemed to echo through the trees. "Do you hear that?" Sarah asked, stopping in her tracks. "Yeah, it sounds like people," Lucas said, his heart racing. "Let's follow it." They pushed through the thick vegetation, following the voices until they emerged into a clearing. There, they found a small group of people gathered around a fire, their faces gaunt and hollow. "Hey! Are you okay?" Lucas called out, relief flooding his voice. The group turned, their expressions blank as they stared at the newcomers. "You shouldn't have come here," one of them said, a woman with sunken eyes and unkempt hair. "This island is cursed." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, stepping forward. "We're lost. We need help. The island takes those who arrive. It doesn't let them leave," the woman replied, her voice low and haunting. "Once you're here, you're part of the island's curse." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "That's ridiculous. We just want to survive." "You don't understand," another man said, his voice trembling. "The island feeds on despair. It will trap you here, just like all of us." As the group began to murmur among themselves, Sarah grabbed Lucas's arm. "We need to leave. This isn't right." "Wait," Lucas said, turning back to the group. "How do we escape? Please, tell us." "There's no escape," the woman said, her voice tinged with sadness. "We've tried. The island won't let us go. It feeds on our hope." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a low growl echoed from the trees. The group fell silent, their faces pale with fear. "It senses new arrivals," the woman whispered, backing away from the fire. "Run!" Lucas shouted, grabbing Sarah's hand. They turned to flee, but the foliage rustled ominously, and shadowy figures began to emerge from the trees, twisted forms with hollow eyes and sorrowful expressions. "Join us," they cried in unison, their voices a chilling chorus. "Don't look back," Lucas urged, sprinting through the underbrush. They could hear the creatures pursuing them, their breaths hot on their heels. As they raced through the trees, Lucas felt the weight of despair pressing down on him. "We can't let them catch us," he yelled, adrenaline surging through his veins. Finally, they burst into a clearing, and in the distance, they spotted a small boat washed ashore. "There! If we can get to that boat, we can escape," Lucas shouted, hope igniting in his chest. "Come on!" Sarah cried, and they sprinted toward the vessel. But as they reached it, the shadowy figures closed in, and the growls grew louder. "You cannot leave," they shrieked, their voices echoing in the night. "Start the engine," Lucas shouted, fumbling to find the keys. But the boat was lifeless, its engine silent. "Help me," Sarah yelled, trying to push the boat into the water. "Just a little more," Lucas urged, feeling the creatures closing in behind them. The air was thick with despair, and he could feel the weight of the island pressing down on them. Finally, with one last push, they managed to get the boat into the water. "Get in," Lucas shouted, climbing aboard as Sarah followed closely behind. As they scrambled to start the engine, the shadowy figures lunged at them, their hands reaching for the boat. "You can't escape," they cried, their voices filled with rage. "Come on, come on," Lucas yelled, twisting the ignition. The engine sputtered and roared to life, and he immediately shoved the throttle forward. They tore away from the shore, the creatures screaming as they faded into the darkness behind them. "We did it!" Sarah gasped, her heart racing as they sped away from the cursed island. But as they looked back, they could see the figures standing on the beach, their hollow eyes watching them disappear into the night. "We're free!" Lucas shouted, but deep down, he felt the lingering weight of despair. "Just keep going," Sarah urged, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "We need to get as far away as possible." As they sailed into the open ocean, the sun began to rise, illuminating the water with a golden glow. But even in the light, a shadow lingered in their minds, the haunting reminder of the island and the souls trapped within. They were survivors, but the island would always be a part of them, a dark memory hidden beneath the waves.